Okie doke. And just checking to make sure that we are in fact live. 80% sure that we are. Are we there? No, okay, there we are. Alright. We are live.
白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
Alright, good afternoon, and let's move to the main. There we are. Alright, so it looks like some guy popped in and I think popped out, so you could give a dislike. I'm curious about that. I want to check the ratio, just because it'd be funny. Sometimes that happens, where like a dude will pop in, be like, oh yeah, fuck this guy, he's streaming. And then he'll like leave a dislike, which is kind of funny. Let's see. Oh no, not the case. Huh. Alright, fair enough. At any rate, so, qualifiers. I'm gonna have to get I'm gonna have to concoct a rigmarole for qualifiers. But I guess the easiest is this is a stream of peace. We here at Ekelux live streams. Oh, Alien Sabatino, hey buddy, what's going down? We here at Ekelux live streams are all about radical love and inclusion. We are all about peace and tolerance, and of course, diversity macht frei. So that's and we advocate nothing, we endorse nothing There will be 0 exhortations. This is only about discussion, comprehension, and understanding. We are all about cultural exchange, because that's what we're all about. Okay, there we go. At any rate, so just happen to have a copy of the Essential Talmud by Mr. Aidan Steinsaltz, and I have just another couple of days to read through this. So today I'm going to list off a couple of things that I think sound kind of interesting to read about. And if any of these sound of any interest whatsoever, please let me know. So, here we go. These are the chapter headings. What is the Talmud? That was number 1. Number 2, life in the Talmudic period. Number 3, the oral law, the first generations. Number 4, the oral law, the era of Zugat, or pairs. Number 5, the Tanaim. That's italicized. That's a Hebrew word. Number 6, the compilation of the Mishnah. Number 7, the Amoraim in Babylonia. Number 8, the Amoraim in Palestine. Number 9, the redaction of the Babylonian Talmud. The redaction? Yeah, I think we read that one. I think we read that one. Number 10, Talmudic exegesis, which I actually did read. Number 11, the printing of the Talmud. I did not read that one. Number 12, the persecution and banning of the Talmud. That one I did read. Number 13, the structure of the Talmud. Number 14, the layout of a page of the Talmud. Number 15, the subject matter of the Talmud. Number 16, prayers and benedictions, which we read last night. Number 17, Sabbath, which I think I deleted, but that's fine. 18 was the festivals. 19, marriage and divorce. 20, status of women. Number 21, civil law. Number 22, criminal law. Number 23, sacrifices. That was the first one. That was a lot of fun. I loved that one, and I'm going to be looking into these sacrifices. It's a macabre subject, but I can't help it. Number 24, dietary laws. Number 25, ritual purity and impurity. A fantastic chapter. I read that one. Number 26, ethics and halakha. Number 27, derek eretz, which is deportment. I think I might read that one. Number 28 is the world of mysticism. Also a fantastic chapter. Number 29, Midrash, or the halakhic exegesis. Number 30, Talmudic way of thinking. Number 31, strange and bizarre problems. Ooh, that sounds kind of cool too. Number 32 is methods of study. Number 33 is Talmud and the Halakha. Number 34 is Agadah in the Talmud. I don't know what Agadah is. Number 35, what is a scholar? Thy name is Duvid. Number 36, the Talmud's importance for the people. And finally, number 37, the Talmud has never been completed. I'm liking number 31, strange and bizarre problems, and also number 27. So I'm just going to throw it to chat. Press 1 for deportment. Press 2 for strange and bizarre problems. 1 for deportment, 2 for strange and bizarre problems. So there we go. And I'm going to prep a track Thinking about playing some BOC. Alright, so we got a 2 from Mr. Goose. And I'll be perfectly honest, that one sounds like it's probably the direction that I want to go to. We're going to remove, yes. We're going to remove GTFO. Oh, it looks like the 2s have it. Okay, fair enough. Alright. Then I think what I'll do is just go ahead and go with that one. So there we go. Strange and Bizarre Problems. Can't help but be interested myself. So there we go. I'm gonna try to get I didn't have time. Things popped up and I didn't set up a track. Let's see here. We're gonna go with you, and I'm going to just get a track in general because I freaking love music. I want to play something. I want to play something during the break, and I want it to be at least somewhat amusing. So, I think I want to go with something a little. We're doing Strange and Bizarre Problems. So if we're doing Strange and Bizarre Problems, we're going to play a Strange and Bizarre track. That's what we're going to do. And I want an associated image. Again, I should have done this before the stream, but I just got a little bit caught up. So that's kind of my bad. Pics, and let's see here. I think I don't have a specific. Okay, that's the one I'm gonna do. It's easy, and I don't have to think about it. Nice and easy. Okay, it's retarded, but that's fine. We're just gonna go with it. All right, and now we're gonna go over to Strange and Bizarre Problems. Sorry about that. So where are we? Strange and Bizarre Problems was 268. Big Ten 4. 268. Where are we? There we are. Check. Alright, so here we go. Strange and Bizarre Problems. We are now going to engage in some cultural exchange so that we may understand what's going on in the world. So here we are. Hey, Thomas O'Malley. What's going down, buddy? Alright, acquaintance with the basic Talmudic methods furthers our comprehension of an ostensibly odd phenomenon, the bizarre and outlandish issues sometimes debated therein. The problems that are clarified with great thoroughness and seriousness are largely practical and prosaic interests. Oh no, so here we're going to talk about minutia. Okay. Well, this is what happens when you do a dive. You never know what you're going to get. And in some cases, their solution has practical implications. But the Talmud also relates to questions that are extremely unlikely to arise in everyday life, and to some that may not be totally unrealistic, but appear absurd because details are of infinitesimal importance. Oh, and because details of infinitesimal importance are discussed with a gravity out of all proportion to their significance. If there is anything that I've learned about stiff-necked rule followers, it's that they will go on for ages about bullshit that simply does not matter. Continuing. Those cognizant of the Talmud's patterns of thinking are aware that hypothetical elucidation of an elemental problem can never be regarded as insignificant. Some questions may be and I've noticed this, by the way. I have noticed a large number of fellow whites, especially when they are involved in law degrees and trying to pass the bar. I have seen many of them. You pose a seemingly innocuous question, and it's peculiar. They pick it up like some exotic seashell, and they just go over it with elaborate interest. And my gosh, and it's stunning. It's stunning, some of the things that will catch their attention. Anyway, some questions may be insoluble within the Talmudic texts, but in seeking an answer, the scholar presents a certain case, a model, with whose aid he tries to clarify the nature of the problem. There is yet another argument in favor of these discussions, since the Talmud, in general, is not primarily concerned with practical application. Almost all problems are granted equal weight. It is not the urgent need of a solution that counts, but the intrinsic interest of the issue. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Thus, the claim that a problem is unrealistic would bear little weight in rabbinical circles. See, this is what I'm talking about. And I think, I'm starting to think, what is it, syncretistic? I think that it's syncretism that is so interesting to these guys, taking disparate elements and attempting to stitch them together and to fashion them together. I honestly think that's where I think that's where they're coming from, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Excuse me. Oh, that's okay. MK Ultra, you need to settle down, buddy. All right, continuing. Thus, the claim that a problem is unrealistic would bear little weight in rabbinical circles. We sometimes find constructions so dense and convoluted that it is almost impossible to envisage their implementation. But what of it? Quote, "It is Torah and therefore deserves to be studied." End quote. The sages commented that several halakot, quote, "never existed and never will," end quote, because of the numerous restrictions on practical implementation. Quote, "Why were they written? Study and you will be rewarded," end quote. This approach implies that even the Torah laws may be understood in such a way that the possibility of implementing them will be extremely remote. At the same time, there is no restriction on detailed examination of these laws and their implications, not merely as an intellectual exercise, but as true study, which is its own reward. For example, the Talmud contains an extremely complicated discussion of a mouse that brings breadcrumbs into a house cleaned of hametz for Passover. The sages launch into an analysis of the mouse, the number of crumbs in the house before and after his entrance, the possibility that a rat might enter after the mouse, and other potential developments. This discourse on rodents takes up almost an entire page of the Talmud and is rich in interesting theories and basic evidence, all aimed at solving the problem of the crumbs deposited by the mouse. There is also an involved debate on childbirth relating to the question of birthrights. I'll continue the sentence. On the question of birthrights, in the course of which the sages ponder the problem of the fetus transferred from one womb to another. Holy shit. That technology didn't even exist at the time. Elsewhere, the text takes up the mythical golem and asks whether such a being is entitled to participate in minyan. I don't know what minyan is. It's worth noting, of course, that asking whether a golem is entitled to participate in some kind of a ritual, that's an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's an episode where something happens where there's a fuck up with Data, the character of Data played by Brent Spiner, and there's a weird court hearing or something, and Picard has to defend Data because they want to turn him off permanently, they just want to destroy him or whatever. And the court demands that there's a person that is pro and a person that's con. And if I recall correctly, it's Commander Riker that is ordered to participate as the con, as the person who wants to destroy Data. So I think it's kind of a funny concept. It's a funny episode, the idea of being forced to play devil's advocate, for something that you vehemently dislike. I mean, within the context of the drama, we all know that Data is a gargantuan Casio tone calculator, but at the same time, you're going to treat him like a character because it's a story. It's fun. Anyway, it's a funny thing. Apparently in the Talmud, they've been talking about that ages ago. That's really funny. Continuing. Many of these, that is actually funny. I've noticed that there are a lot of television shows that have actually cribbed things from the Bible and the Talmud. That is genuinely of great interest to me. Makes me think I should be reading much more of the Bible. Continuing. Many of these bizarre and imaginative issues are relevant even in the sphere of practical halakha because the principles and rulings derive from the discussions. Because the principles and rulings derive from the discussions are applicable elsewhere. Since the discourse on mice or on the golem is as thorough and precise as the analysis of more practical problems, the conclusions will always be applicable to some degree in other cases. The most prosaic problems could sometimes only be resolved in this way. The Talmudic stand is reminiscent of pure theoretical research. There, too, the solutions to marginal or implausible problems are applied to practical issues. The Talmudic scholars and students have long known that it is sometimes impossible to anticipate the outcome of a certain study, although it has shown no indications of pertaining to reality. Other practical consequences of investigating these strange and remote questions are not always immediately evident. A certain question may appear absurd and meaningless in one era and become vitally important in a later age, when technology has made great strides. This is the Data story. Data or Data, I can't remember how the crew pronounced his name. That's weird. From this point of view, since the Talmud is open to every type and level of query, it is not surprising that many discussions that once appeared theoretical and unrealistic seem amazingly perceptive forecasts of now current issues. One of the subjects of Talmudic debate, the, quote, tower floating in the air, end quote, was cited for centuries as an example of the degree to which the human imagination can run riot. The sages certainly dreamed that mechanical methods of constructing flying towers and fortresses would someday be developed, nor were they particularly intrigued by the problem. But since one of their number happened to raise the question of what would happen if a tower should float in the air, they settled down enthusiastically to clarify all possible aspects of the problem. These visions no longer appear far-fetched and absurd, and in fact the discussion now helps us to solve some very real problems. Similarly, the Talmudic scholars and codifiers devoted considerable attention to the question of the artificial insemination of a woman and the ensuing complications over the legal and moral status of mother and child. It took almost 2,000 years for this problem to take on practical significance, and many other discourses on subjects that still appear implausible may someday provide answers to important questions. The debate on the golem, for example, is only one of many references to the problem of defining the nature of man and his limitations, and some of the discussions touch on extremely bizarre questions. The Jerusalem Talmud, for example, analyzes the case of a man with the head of a beast and a beast with a human head, and suggests, partly as an intellectual exercise, the complications that might ensue from this type of split personality. This particular problem has not yet taken on topical relevance, parenthetical, except to a limited extent in halakha relating to malformed births which the Talmud discusses at length, and parenthetical, but the possibility that it may someday be cited in relation to a modern issue cannot be discounted. Side note, too, that I have no interest in applying Talmudic law to the, what are they called? The chimera. I have no interest in applying Talmudic law to a chimera. I think that, let's say that the chimera was born or made in China. I think that the Chinese should be taking care of it in their own way. I think that if the chimera is made in a European context, it's Europeans that should take care of it, not the stiff-necked rule followers. Continuing, nonetheless, the sages did not concern themselves with the pragmatic aspects of the problem, since their objective was not the resolution of human questions, but the study for its own sake. They always employed models based on the world around them, even if such constructs seemed unreal in the day. One of the most frequent queries in the Talmud is Hiki Dami, parenthetical, how exactly can this state of affairs be depicted, end parenthetical. The question is posed when the sages wish to clarify a certain matter with greater precision and depth because the basic ruling is too generalized or too abstract, and only the construction of a certain model can help them ascertain the truth. Such models often reveal that a ruling that appears simple and effective in the abstract is actually impossible, rather implausible, or anomalous, or calls for elaboration. The advantages of employing models becomes even more apparent in the course of such elucidation, even when the models are constructed through the combination of two methods, parenthetical in accordance with the theory that differences of opinion should be reconciled as far as is possible, end parenthetical, or through the incessant attempt to solve abstract problems by citing concrete examples. The result, however, cumbersome or strange, is more effective than any abstract analysis. Construction of a model makes it possible to examine all the components of the questions and the interaction between various issues. What they mean here, by the way, is by constructing a model, what they mean is they take sort of a weird query and then they create like a situation, an anecdote, a story involving people, objects, and situations, much like a stage play or something. And then they analyze that stage play as thoroughly as possible. Okay, continuing. There is nothing surprising, therefore, in the weirdness of some of the more unrealistic explanations. Within the context of the Talmud, though, they are vitally important and sometimes produce the most satisfactory solutions. The many practical consequences, some of them astoundingly relevant to posterity, should be regarded as the product of this unique way of thinking. And that's the whole chapter right there. That was it. I might go for one more, maybe, I'm not sure. But in the meantime, I'm going to play a track. Let's see here. Yeah. This is a remix by Beck Hansen. I don't know how many of the younger kids are aware, but whatever, about 20 years, 25 years or so ago, Beck was really big in the mid-90s. I actually really liked his music. He's a freaking weirdo, and a Scientologist, which, strangely, I am willing to forgive. But it's really clever, and I kind of like his stuff. So anyway, this is a remix of a track that was released in 1997. The track is Sexy Boy by Air off of their Moon Safari album. A fantastic album, highly recommended. But this is a remix of one of the songs from that album. And I just happen to like the track because it's fucking weird. It's Beck being Beck. Anyhow, I hope the sound levels are where I want them to be, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring up the sound levels over time. So should be fine. But at any rate, here's Beck Hansen with Sexy Boy, rather Air with Sexy Boy, as remixed by Beck Hansen circa 1998.
Take me for a ride.
Oh gosh, I got lost in the track again like an idiot. I like the outro of that track. It's kind of weird, but for some reason, some of his stuff is actually pretty good. And I'm always like really freaked out about copyright. So like, part of the reason that I pick really obscure tracks is because the chances of getting a copyright strike decreases. So like, nobody cares about freaking a remix of. No one cares about that track. So that's why I play it. But it does say content issues detected. Gosh, they're always doing that, aren't they? It's only an issue if I get a worldwide block, and there are only a couple of tracks that I know that I have played where I've gotten a worldwide block. That's not one of them. But whatever. At any rate, so we have finished that one bit with high weirdness being discussed within the Talmud, and I wonder if there's another itty bitty, a very, very small one that I can read. I'm going for page count right now. Methods of study, deportment. You know what? Deportment is only 5 pages. So I think I'm gonna do deportment, and that one's 242. So we're gonna do two sections tonight. 242. There we are. Deportment. Super small. Look at that. Itty bitty. Itty bitty. Okay, here we go. Also, just as a side note, Beck's album Odelay is quintessential. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. And I would say that, God, what was... Because he had an album after Odelay. It was Silver. I mean, he's really freaking... Mutations, that's what it was. If you're into, like, late 90s, like, quasi-rocker folk, his 1998 album Mutations is actually pretty good. His next album, Midnight Vultures, is 100% Globo Homo. 100%. And I will admit, I do like the album. It's totally degenerate. I know. I will admit, even back in the day, I didn't like the track Sex Laws. Listen to the track Sex Laws. That track paves the way for the Globo Homo program going on right now. I'm not joking. And I say this as a person who is a fan of Beck. Yes, I like his stuff. Yes, he is number one out there, and number two, I think that he was very likely goaded into making certain types of songs that, in all honesty, I'm not a big fan of, but yeah, what are you going to do? At any rate, Midnight Vultures is pretty amusing, but I really, really liked Odelay and also Mutations. I think those two are really great albums. And also Air's first 2 albums, I'm pretty sure Moon Safari came out in 97. It could have been 98, but I think it was 97. Anyway, Moon Safari is fantastic, and everyone should absolutely check out Moon Safari. Brilliant album, start to finish, absolutely wonderful, just fantastic. And their second album, 10,000 Hertz Legend, it's not bad, but there are only I think 3 or 4 tracks on that album. 4 tracks. There are 4 tracks on that album that I like. Obviously, the 2 tracks with the vocals by Beck, and track number 1, outstanding track. And there was one other one, and I can't remember what it was. At any rate, check out Moon Safari. brilliant album. I don't know why I got onto that. All right, whatever. I'm not going to worry about it. Hey, Dirk Sturmer, what you doing, buddy? Okay, so here we are. We're going to go to Derek Eretz, parenthetical, deportment, and parenthetical. The term Derek Eretz has various meanings in Talmudic literature. Above all, it is, quote, the way of the world, end quote, the way in which people behave accepted deportment. What a weird sentence. Above all, it is the way of the world, the way in which people behave accepted deportment. I don't understand how one is to read that sentence. That's very weird. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to continue. Okay. It is not contained in a fixed code within the halakha, and although rendered in detail in the Talmud, these halakhat are not binding. Derek Eretz is regarded as the foundation for any kind of progress, rather than as a law. Rules change from time to time and place to place, but a man is generally expected to behave in accordance with prevailing custom. Derek Eretz is demanded of every individual. Although the sages deplore the unlearned man, they concede that he may be a decent human being even without a formal education, but, quote, he who knows nothing of Mishnah or the Bible or Derek Eretz is not a civilized man, end quote. In other words, those who do not observe the accepted rules of behavior place themselves beyond the pale. It was even said that such people were ineligible as witnesses. See, now this is actually extraordinarily feminine style thinking, because this is basically about social pressures. And as we all know, women are more prone to conformity to social pressures than men. So I kind of find it funny that there's sort of a feminine element in here somewhere. Continuing, the demand for Derek Eretz directed at every individual was stressed even more strongly in the case of scholars for two reasons. The first was external. The scholar must be, quote, beloved by heaven and pleasant on earth, end quote, that is, respected by his fellow men, fellow whites. If he does not observe the rules of deportment and conduct, he demeans the Torah by displaying himself in an unfavorable light, and must therefore act so that people will be able to say, quote, that a man who has studied the Torah behaves well and his conduct is correct, end quote. But there is another aspect to the injunction to follow Derek Eretz, since correct behavior is part of the whole undefinable range of actions and thought known as da'at, parenthetical, knowledge or wisdom, end parenthetical. And da'at is, it's D-A apostrophe A-T, so I'm only pronouncing it da'at because I have no freaking clue how to pronounce it, and I don't want it to sound like dot. Okay, continuing. This is not merely the sum of knowledge, but practical understanding, common sense, and general behavior as well. Da'at guides a man in how to behave with his family and others. It determines his way of speaking. It is the ability to decide when to persist and when to forbear. And although it is not in itself written law, every man connected with Torah is expected to be endowed with da'at to a reasonable extent. For generations, scholastic tradition referred to the, quote, fifth Shalhan Arak, end quote, an additional section of that famous work dealing with non-halakhic human relations. The sages believed that da'at was a most important asset, and they said, quote, if you have acquired knowledge, what do you lack? If you lack knowledge, what have you acquired? End quote. That's funny, this is the seedling of knowledge is power, isn't it? Scholars were strongly urged to acquire da'at, and the Talmud was emphatic in its view that, quote, a scholar in whom there is no da'at is worse than a carcass, end quote. I think this is where because there's this big thing about scholastic stuff, studies, going to university and so on. I've noticed that this is a very big cultural thing within the Jewish community, and it seems as though this is where where it starts right here. Da'at is to a large degree a natural quality, since some people will always know instinctively how to react appropriately to different situations without training or instruction. But even those not blessed with this quality were expected to acquire knowledge, to learn it from others in order to be worthy of bearing the honorable title of scholar. The saying that, quote, the service of Torah is greater than its study, end quote, implies that he who was privileged to serve a great sage, even in prosaic and simple matters, learned more from him than those disciples who merely attended his formal lessons. And sometimes the most important acquisition was da'at, the knowledge of how to behave in various situations and toward different types of people. There are hundreds of anecdotes in the Talmud about disciples who took note of details of the conduct of their rabbi, not necessarily in spheres related to formal study. The etiquette and customs of the Talmudic era were collected in a small tractate entitled Derek Eretz, which is a treasury of information on the morals and conduct of that era. The halakha on Derek Eretz encompasses diverse spheres of life. Many laws, for example, are devoted to rules of etiquette at formal meals. This was important in an age when, actually, let me go ahead and, the light is getting to me, and I'm going to turn volume off just to be sure. Okay. Okay. Alright, I don't know what smug face is going on about, but that's fine. Okay, continuing. This was important in an age when it was the custom to hold protracted feasts, parenthetical, where the guests reclined on sofas, end parenthetical, involving considerable ceremony and formality. These rules included such pearls of common sense as, quote, it is forbidden to talk during the meal lest the food be swallowed the wrong way, end quote, as well as instructions on how to eat various dishes. The tractate also relates with humorous intent how our Akiva invited 2 disciples to his home in order to test their knowledge of manners and etiquette. He set before them meat that had not been cooked sufficiently. One of the 2, who was well-mannered, tasted the meat, found it inedible, and left it on his plate, while the other tried to tear his portion apart by force. Said our Akiva mockingly to the latter, quote, not thus, my son. Put your foot on the dish and pull, end quote. Okay, alright, whatever. He's messing with them, but alright. Okay. Many of these rules of behavior were based on purely aesthetic considerations, such as instructions on how to lay a table or how to eat certain dishes. But there were other rules of more fundamental significance, for example, the prohibition against defiling various foods. This derives, to a certain extent, from the general interdict against wanton destruction or defacement, which is fully valid from the viewpoint of the halakha being based on the law of Torah, though considerably expanded by the sages. I've noticed this, by the way, brief aside, interdict against wanton destruction and defacement. I've noticed a lot of fellow whites that have this thing about saving things, which is strange. I don't know what to make of it, but I happen to know a lot that are hoarders. There really are a fair number in my neighborhood, and it's strange. It's actually really, really strange. I genuinely don't know what to make of it. I think the wanton destruction, maybe it has been inferred as don't allow things that can be used to be thrown away. Maybe, I'm not sure. It's very weird. Anyway, continuing. It was also based on an attitude of respect for food as man's sustenance. It is related that a certain man came to visit one of the sages and rested his plate on a slice of bread. The sage removed the bread from under the plate and ate it. Since the visitor did not take the hint, the sage said to him, quote, "I thought you would be scalded by lukewarm water, and now I see that even boiling water does not affect you," end quote, admonishing him for having failed to grasp that food is not eaten after having been spoiled or treated with disrespect. Another aspect of the rules of etiquette is reflected in the saying of the sages that when the temple still existed, the altar atoned for sins, whereas after destruction, each man's table atoned for him. This concept was aimed at encouraging people to invite poor guests to their homes, since their participation in meals could compensate for the material and selfish aspects of eating and lend it a dimension of sanctity. That kind of makes I get it. I do get it, and I like charity. I do like charity, but I have this thing about inviting strangers into my own home, and I will say that the fellow whites that I know, shockingly low number of them invite strangers into their home. I have known some Gentiles to do that though, but it is interesting the idea of the table being an altar that atones for sins. That's actually kind of an interesting concept. Alright, continuing. The view of a man's table as an altar also influenced the rules of table etiquette, for eating was viewed not only as satisfaction of an urge, but as part of a whole way of life and of worship of the Creator. This was the basis for the customs later practiced in many Jewish communities, of placing salt on the table at every meal, recalling the salt placed on the altar, or the custom of removing knives from the table during the grace after meals. Iron was not placed on the altar, since it could shorten a man's lifespan when used as a weapon, and thus could not be placed in proximity to the temple, which extends his life. That's interesting. Salt. That actually kind of is interesting. Alright, continuing. There was yet another dimension to the rules of Derek Eretz, the obligation cited in the Torah to respect certain people and treat them in specific ways. There was a general exhortation to respect parents, parenthetical, quote, honor thy father and thy mother, end quote, end parenthetical, scholars, and the king. Distinctions were drawn between the ways in which each category should be treated, but an attitude of respect towards one's elders and toward the wise was part of biblical law itself. I really think they're conflating Bible and Tanakh. I genuinely think that's what's going on here. Continuing, and was developed and elaborated in the rules of conduct. In whose presence should one rise? Who should enter or leave a room first? Who should be accorded the honor of doing something first? All these subjects, which are largely optional but became part of formal halakhic tradition, are dealt with in the Code of Derek Eretz, Side note to that, whoever enters the room first is of lesser importance. Whoever enters the room second is the one guiding the first one into a room. So that's actually a very major issue. Not even joking. The guiding rule is that when an honor is to be bestowed, the person most worthy is given precedence over others where indignity is involved. The least important member of the group acts first. See, there it is. Boom, right there. For example, the most important member of a group takes precedence upon entry, but the least important exits first. There it is, right there. Boom. The halakot pertaining to respect for one's father or rabbi are numerous and emphasize that betters should be revered. In daily family life, it is, of course, not possible, parenthetical, particularly in the case of children, and parenthetical, to observe all the niceties of good conduct and ceremony, and there were those who said that the father or rabbi who agreed to forego honor was honored nonetheless. On the other hand, a monarch is forbidden to forego honor, since, unlike the cases of the father or rabbi, the king's honor is not his alone, and respect is paid to the monarchy as such. The rabbi, whose wisdom is self-accomplished, parenthetical, or similarly, the father, end parenthetical, is entitled to renounce honor and ceremony. Therefore, although it was said that the son was forbidden to sit on his father's chair, to contradict him, or to do anything in his presence without his permission, particularly if it entailed disrespect, these injunctions were not observed strictly and were generally applied only when the sons reached adulthood and were themselves eager to honor their parents. An amusing illustration of this attitude is found in the Talmudic sources. A father's will stipulated that he was leaving his property to his son on condition that the son become a fool. The sages could find no logical explanation for the strange document and appealed to R. Joshua ben Hananiah, son of a gun, whatever, anyway, who was renowned as a great scholar and a very shrewd man. When they arrived at his home, they found him crawling on all fours, his small son riding his back. The sages waited respectfully, lest they disturb their rabbi at play. When they eventually asked his opinion of the will, he replied, quote, "You yourselves have seen the meaning. The father meant to say that his son should come into the inheritance when he himself had children." End quote. It's actually kind of an I kind of like that. It's funny. I'll give that a pass. I'll give it a pass. It's like it matters if I give somebody a pass. Oh, great. Continuing. Correct deportment and conduct were part of the da'at, which it was incumbent on every man to acquire, and as the sages themselves emphasized time and again, this also encompassed the ability to discern when it was permissible to deviate from halakha and the laws governing conduct. And that's it. There we go. Boom. That is the end of our chapter. We are now at the 12:02 mark, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and call stream because I kind of want to get to bed. So I think that's where I'm going to go. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think that's what's going to happen. So, okay. Okay. There's a little bit of spurging going on in chat. I have to clean up the chat just a hair. Of the various things, I just want to keep the chat generally clean because there are lots of people that look into streams and chats and comments, and they flag things based on language. So I'm only deleting a couple of things here and there, like whatever. It's not a big deal. The only things that I care about are, and no one's done anything with words that start with the letter K or N, so I'm not talking about that, but just anything that could, anything that an SJW would flag, I just don't want to deal with. So this has nothing at all to do with whether I like a person or not. It's just a matter of trying to keep the chat as clean as possible. I'm really sorry about it. Again, I cannot stress this enough. I personally don't really care. I just don't want to, because I know this channel is going to get shut down. Anything that is not completely in line with the progressive agenda is going to get shut down sooner or later, and that's basically me in a nutshell. So I know that this is on a limited timeline, but I'm just trying to keep it going for as long as possible. So I'm sorry about that. I'm really sorry about that. Yes, groomed sweetie. Yeah, gotta cater to your enemies, otherwise they win. Yes. I am half leaf. One of my parents was a leaf, so that one cuts a little bit deep. It's a little more true than I want it to be. Anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call a stream. Super tired. I'm gonna go to bed. And tomorrow, I think, tomorrow's the 1st. So Thursday, I'm going to, that's right. I don't have a rake yet, but my God, I kind of want one. Right. Okay. All right. Anyway, so yeah, tomorrow I'm going to read another one, possibly 2 excerpts from the Essential Talmud. We will learn just a little bit more, and I'll be moving over to formal readings of the Talmud. I just happen to have a copy, like an online copy, sort of, I guess. And here, let me just, I'm just gonna do a quick search, and you'll see how fun it is. Here we go. So I'm just typing in the word sacrifice, and we're just going to go and read the first 3. We're going to read the very first 3. All of them are from the Mishnah, Rosh Hashanah, Pesachim, and Peah. So those are the 3. So here we go. Just typing in the word sacrifice. This is what pops up. And it just, the sentence starts and then just stops very abruptly. So I have no idea what the rest of the context is. So, apologies. Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 1:1. Of the reign of, and bracket, kings, and for festivals on the 1st of Elul. It is a new year for the Ma'aser Behama, bracket, the tithe taken from that year's newborns of the flock or herd, and brought to the temple as a sacrifice. And that's the end of the quote. So yeah, like, you just get weird stuff. Actually, here we go. Genesis 2:2. Where are we? He said, please now take your son, your only one you love, Yitzhak, Isaac maybe, and go to the land of Moriah, worship, sacrifice him before me as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, and I will designate to you. Abraham awoke early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took his 2 assistants with him, and his son Yitzhak. He split the wood of the burnt offering, rose, and went to the place that Elohim had designated to him. On the 3rd day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from afar. Abraham said to his assistants, remain here with the donkey. And of course, everyone knows this, but that's just an example of the kind of stuff that you'll see. Let's see. Okay, so that was number 2. Oh no, that was, which one was that? I don't know which one that was, but here's a different one. This is a longer one. I'm going to read this one. Again, this is just a general dive into an online version of the Talmud. Rabban Gamliel used to say, quote, anyone who has not mentioned these 3 things on Pesach has not discharged his obligation, and these are, bracket, the items that must be mentioned, that he must mention, and bracket, the Pesach sacrifice, matzah and bitter herbs, the Pesach Passover sacrifice is offered because the omnipresent passed over the homes of our ancestors in Egypt. Matzah is eaten because our ancestors were redeemed in Egypt. Bitter herbs are eaten because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors in Egypt. End quote. In every generation, a person must see himself as though he personally had gone out of Egypt, as it is stated, quote, and you shall tell your son on that day, saying, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt, end quote. Therefore, we are obliged to thank, praise, laud, glorify, exalt, lavish, bless, extol, and adore He who made all these miracles for our ancestors and for us. He brought us out from slavery to freedom, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to celebration, a festival from darkness to great light, and from servitude to redemption. Therefore, say to him, Hallelujah. Let's see here. Actually, I'm going to continue reading because this is kind of interesting. A 3rd cup would be mixed for the setter, leader, and then blesses God for his meal. The 4th cup is mixed and he finishes Hallel over it while it is in front of him, then recites the blessing over the song of praise. Between these first 3 cups, if he wants to drink, he may drink. Between the 3rd and 4th cups, he may not drink. That's very specific, highly specific. We may not eat of, excuse me, sorry. All right, continuing. We may not eat of afikoman, a dessert or other foods eaten after the meal, after we are finished eating. The Pesach sacrifice. If some of the company fell asleep, they may continue to eat of the Pesach sacrifice. If all of them fell asleep, they may not continue to eat it. Rabbi Yosef says, quote, if they only nod off, they may continue to eat it. If they fall asleep completely, they may not continue to eat it. Weird. Yeah, so, but that's the blessing ceremony, I assume, of the Pesach. So these are the kinds of things that I'm going to be reading about. I suppose I'm just going to have to go through like a series of general, what do you call, all right, anon user, please no Fed posting, buddy. The general walkabouts that I'm going to be engaging in, they're just going to be general walkabouts. So once I actually finally get myself to reading the actual Talmud, that's kind of what it's going to be like, just going through and seeing what pops up. All right, so apparently there's some kind of a little thing going on in chat. Okay, yeah, there's a complete thing going on. Oh my gosh. All right, I'm going to see if there's anything going on about Let's see here. I thought I could gassed you. No, I try to not actually hide people, and like any Fed posting, I generally just I either delete it individually, or I time the person out. Like if it's a repeat thing, if it's just like one, like I don't really care. So like I'm not looking to hide people just yet. Thankfully, my channel is small, so I don't have to worry about that stuff. So anyway, yeah, just anon user, please settle down a hair, please. Anyhow, yeah, I'm tired. I've been banging on for an extra like 10 minutes foolishly. So I think I am going to call a stream. So here we go. I don't think I'm going to play an album. What do we have here? I might play one album. I might play one single album. We're going to remove this, yes. And yeah, I'm going to play one album. One album. It's going to be a short album, but it's going to be a fun one. Let's see here. Downloads, yes. What are we looking at? We're going to go with Mitch Murder because I freaking love Mitch Murder. This is... I think I'm going to go with Mech Hunter because I really like Mech Hunter. So... yeah, we're going to go with Mech Hunter. It's an easy and fun album to listen to. So that's the direction we're going to go. At any rate... so, I want to go ahead and thank everyone for, I want to thank Spurg Chat for showing up. Hey guys, how's it going? We're going to do more, Talmud streams in the future so that we can learn a little bit more about what's going on. And that's going to be that. And hopefully, when I do my forays and investigations into sacrifices, they will be fun and amusing and entertaining. One can only hope. I'm going to treat it like story time, so that's just how I'm approaching it. At any rate, I did no K-streaming, so yes, I'll be enjoying all of my maple syrup as well. It'll be just fantastic, and I'm going to sing the Royal Canadian Kilted Yaxman anthem before I go to bed, as is tradition. But I did no K-streaming, so as bizarre as it might sound, I am going to just make mention that I am a big fan of people exercising their God-given right to keep and bear arms as enshrined within the Second Amendment. I'm a big fan of people exercising their civil liberties. That said, if you're going to go so far as to exercise your civil liberties, I think it is vitally important to remember the 4 rules of firearms safety. Rule number 1, always treat every firearm like it is loaded. Rule number 2, never cover or sweep anything that you are not willing to destroy. Rule number 3, your finger stays off of the trigger until your sights are on target. And the 4th and final rule is, be aware of your target and what's beyond it. Safety first. There are any number of stories of people who did not abide by those rules, and sometimes you put a hole in the wall, sometimes it's a television, sometimes it's your foot. Be careful. Don't be silly. Don't do silly things. So there you go. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and play an album. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. Fun for me anyway. It's from a fake video game that doesn't exist, so it's a fake soundtrack to a fake video game. This is by some frickin' Nordic guy. I think he's Swedish, but I'm not sure. He might be from Norway. I really don't know. But Mitch Murder is one of these weird European guys that makes synthwave for some freaking reason. And he decided to do a series of like video game soundtracks and albums and remixes. So weird. What are you gonna do? Weird. At any rate, I'm going to play album, and I am going to I'm going to nod off. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to floss, as I recommend everyone do. And while I floss, we're going to have some music. So there you go. All right, guys. Cheers, and I'll see everyone in the chats.